You need to come home right now. Weird things are happening at home. After my dad's funeral, I turned my phone on to discover a huge number of calls from my daughter, and I immediately suspected something was wrong and she needed my help. She told me everything when I called her back, and from what I heard, I knew that her situation was pretty extraordinary, so I rushed home. When I opened the living room door, I beheld a scene I had never even dreamed of. At the same time, I heard something breaking inside me. This is a story about how marriages are typically founded on the basis of mutual trust and love, and not on one party seeking a specific thing from the other, be it money, fame, or power. My name is Danny, and I'm a 39-year-old office worker. I used to live with my husband, Joseph, long for Joe, and my daughter, Brittany. When I first married Joseph, I disassociated myself from my father. The reason why I had to sever my ties with him is because he was strongly against my marriage to Joseph. I don't mean to brag or anything, but in reality, my family is one of entrepreneurs. By which I mean Dad ran a major conglomerate with branches and subcontractor enterprises around the world. And he himself is a world-famous CEO. I was his only daughter, and he raised me with all the love and care in the world. Unfortunately, I had absolutely no luck with men, and I was always cheated on by men who were only together with me because they were after my money. One of them quit his job because he schemed a plan to depend on me and my money, and another guy was caught by the police when he tried to break into my parents' home and steal their money. My father was worried about me because my experiences with men were so bad. So when Joseph and I went to say our greetings to Dad, I obviously told him I was going to marry him, and Dad flew into a rage, questioning his true motives and his values. He even went in so far as to interrogate me, his own daughter, about where her morals lay. I had been in a relationship with Joseph for 3 years at that point, and during the whole of that time, he never depended on me for any money. And he often paid for our dinner dates and many other things we did together. So I felt like I never had to worry about what Dad claimed Joseph's real intentions were. And for this reason, I rebelled unusually adamantly against him on this particular occasion. What made me so aggravated, and this is what eventually drove me to make the decision to cut all connection with him, is because he never showed any sign of flexibility. In other words, he never once reconsidered his image of Joseph. And persuading him into thinking about the situation otherwise was a lost cause. That made me feel like he was my enemy. Why can't you understand me? I'm positive he'll prove you wrong and make me the happiest woman on earth.
And why don't you understand my concerns, Danny? Marry him and you'll do 2 things. 1, you'll only become miserable, just as all the other stupid punks have made you in the past. And 2, you won't ever cross this threshold of this house again.
I was young then and extremely impulsive compared to the woman I am now, so when Dad told me that, I left home on the spur of the moment and never dared look back. Thinking about it now, there were so many ways I could have persuaded him, but that was the only way I could think of to get away from the situation, and it was only making me uncomfortable a great deal. Sometimes I still think about that time. If I had persuaded Dad and gotten the blessing of my entire family to marry the man I wanted to, I would have been able to show him my daughter, his darling granddaughter, Brittany. We could have had a New Year's dinner together every year and gone on family trips to wherever Brittany suggested we go. I also really regretted putting Mom through that, and my ties with Dad severed notwithstanding, I kept Mom updated on tidings with my family frequently. But it's too late to regret it all now. Joseph may have thought it was a pain in the ass to be so opposed as a candidate to marry me, but even after the whole skirmish with Dad, he said he would still marry me, regardless of if I cut ties with Dad or not. I knew I had found what is known as true love right then.
I want to marry you because I love you, Danny. It's true that before we started dating, you had a certain reluctance to talk about your family because of Mr. Romanoff's status, but you're still you, Miss Danny Romanoff. You have your own personality that wasn't influenced by money or by power. And I know your heart's where it should be, and that's exactly what I fell in love with. Don't worry about me if you want to do what your dad told you.
This little pep talk made me so much more attracted to such a kind and generous man. I wanted to show my father that even though I disowned myself from him, Joseph was not like the other guys, and that he would make me happy. I wanted to prove to him that goodness and trust can be found if you looked in the right direction. Then we got married and had a child, a beautiful little girl. Joseph had been saying something particularly interesting around the time she was born.
We'll only have so much sympathy for Brittany if people think of her as a helpless girl. And although we can protect her now, when she's older, she'll have to live on her own, and what with her grandfather being who he is, she could be in real danger one day. I mean, you were a couple of times, right? Who's to say someone won't find out her family background and go after her? I want her to learn judo or karate or something in self-defense so she'll be able to protect herself.
Interesting idea. Did you used to do judo and karate?
I didn't, but it's the will, Danny. The spirit, the inner peace.
He really wanted her to learn judo or karate. That's why Brittany has been learning both forms of martial arts since kindergarten. And because of that, by the time she was in junior high school, she was officially recognized as one of the top 3 female martial arts athletes in the country. I am very proud of her hard work and the results she's achieved thus far. I wouldn't be surprised if she was recruited to compete in the Olympics one day. However, while she was busy with all her lessons, her dad, who was the one who originally had the idea of sending her to take lessons, did not cooperate at all. In support of Brittany, at least once a month, I had to go outside the city to cheer her on in a competition. Obviously, I would ask Joseph to come with, but every single time he told me he was busy with work and left all the support, from giving Brittany the pep talk she needed whenever she was doubting herself, to actually going across the country to support her in battle, to me. I had weekends off, so I luckily could go to every one of her competitions, but I wanted him to come sometimes and go watch his daughter's games. I was angry at Joseph for not doing anything, even though my daughter started learning these sports simply because he wanted her to. And the fact he was off on weekends too didn't help at all. I had no idea what he did while we were gone. I was curious, but between chaperoning my daughter and working, I just didn't have time to think about it. I was going about my busy day when all of a sudden I got a call from Mom. I call her all the time, but it was rare for her to call me. My gut told me something was wrong, and I quickly answered the phone. "Oh, Danny, honey, I'm sorry to call you. You're right in the middle of work, aren't you? It's just, your father passed away. He was fighting an illness." Wait, what? He apparently had been sick for years. He didn't want anyone to know about his situation, and he fought it quietly. And he was doing the best he could. I wish I could have gone to the hospital to see him, Mom. Why didn't you tell me? Believe me when I say I wanted him to let you know so many times, but he just wouldn't let me. I don't think it was that he wouldn't allow it, but he was just stubborn, I guess. Oh, no. I didn't even get to say goodbye to him, or anything else for that matter, since our fight was all those years ago. That day, and he went to heaven without ever seeing his granddaughter. I was devastated. My mother asked me to come to the funeral, and I said of course I would go. But Joseph didn't seem too enthusiastic about attending the funeral, since Dad had been opposed to my marrying him. When I told him about the funeral, it was clear he didn't seem to be happy about it, so I decided to go by myself. Brittany wanted to go with me, despite the fact she'd never met her grandpa Alex, but she had an important competition to compete in, so she couldn't. On the way to the funeral, I called my daughter to check in on her staying at home. "Oh, Mom, you worry too much. It's only a 30-minute drive from the funeral site to our house, right? It's not that far." "I know, honey, I know, but I'm still worried. I know you'll be okay. Good luck at the tournament." "Thanks. I'll call you if something goes wrong." My daughter was in junior high school and wouldn't be home from the tournament until the evening. I also knew her dad would be home in the evening, so I shouldn't be worried at all, but for some reason I called her that day. But I believed in her and Joseph and turned off my phone as I walked into the funeral home. And then I was so busy with the funeral that it was 6 hours later when I looked at my phone again. When I turned on my phone as I got in my car to go home, I found a large number of incoming calls from my daughter. It was an awful lot of calls. A disturbingly large number of calls. She said she would call me if something went wrong, and judging by the volume of these calls, something must have happened. I rushed to call her back. "Mom, you need to come home right now. Weird things are happening at home." "What's wrong, honey? Why do you sound distressed?" "Okay, listen." After calming her down, she told me that when she came home after her game, she found a pair of shoes belonging to a woman she didn't know on the front porch. They were high heels that could not be mistaken for mine. There was no doubt they belonged to another woman. I rushed back home and I walked straight into the living room to find my husband and a woman I didn't recognize sitting back to back. Upon closer inspection, I saw they were tied together with jump ropes and other kinds of string and rope. Nearby, Brittany was standing with her arms crossed. What's going on here?" "I tied them up myself. These two bums weren't really judo athletes, are you? Neither of you are athletes in general." She spoke with a smug look on her face. "I was going to ask you to come back home and do something about it, but I managed on my own." "Boy, I'll say. As one of the 3 best in the country, there was no way my husband, who never worked out, and a poor woman could dare compete with my daughter, even combined." Joseph was silent, his face downcast, and the women's were glued to Brittany, terrified of what she was capable of. "Brittany, I'm sorry you had to see that. Can you stay in your room while I take care of this?" "Sure thing, Mom. Call me if you need me to whoop their asses again. It'll be great IRL practice." "Such a kind young lady you are." And then she went back to her room with the biggest smile of pride and triumph on her face. And I turned to the two victims. They were tied up like police officers in those criminal movies where the psychopath fastened them against chairs. "And what the hell are you doing like this, Joseph? Making such a mess of things with my daughter?"
It's not what you think. This kind lady's just come to check on the waterworks.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with the waterworks around here, Joseph, and you know it.
Yes, there...
Your own daughter saw what was going on, Joseph, and you still think you can cover up the truth? Tell me exactly what you were doing. If you don't tell me, I'll tell the company about this. Then he started to panic and started talking.
I'm sorry, the truth is, I was cheating on you.
It turned out he had been having an affair with a junior colleague of his at work. When the woman joined the company, Joseph was in charge of educating her on the ways of the workplace. And a relationship that was once professional escalated into a personal one that had been going on for 7 years. He told me that the reason he never attended Brittany's competitions and tournaments on weekends was because he was seeing the woman whom he was currently cheating on me with. I didn't tell him that Brittany was at a tournament today, so he must have thought she was at the funeral with me. Assuming he was safe for the night until later on, he'd invited his lover over and they were enjoying themselves when Brittany came home and did what she thought was right. I finally understand why Dad was so against me marrying this bastard. He never objected to me dating any man in my life. I assumed he opposed the idea because I was getting married to a guy instead of going out with him. But I'm sure he saw Joseph's disloyalty. He was the president of a major corporation after all. He must have been a good judge of character. "It would have been better if you had come after me for my money, you bastard. It's disgusting to betray your wife like this."
I'm telling you that's not what it is. I mean, it was a game or whatever. I don't know.
It was a game? So you can look the woman next to you dead in the eye and say you were just playing around with her?
Well...
All right, I've had enough. I want a divorce. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with you, and I don't want to anymore. The husband I wanted to be with, even if it meant cutting myself away from my parents, was nowhere to be seen. I felt nothing but disgust. I took a picture of the two of them tied together with ropes to capture the evidence. Then I untied them, and then he went on to say,
"And what's so wrong with cheating on your wife, huh? If couples got divorced over something like that, everyone in the world will be divorced at least once. I did you the favor of marrying a woman like you whose only attraction is money. You won't even get your father's inheritance. In that case, of course I'll freaking divorce you. You're absolutely worthless."
Joseph, who was being a coward whilst being incapacitated, became a big-mouthed bastard as soon as he was untied. I guess he thinks he's stronger now that he wasn't tied down. I responded to him calmly. "Of course I'm divorcing you, so please, don't worry. I'll mail you the divorce documents later on." I told him that and decided to leave the house. I went to Brittany's room and told her I was leaving. To my surprise, Brittany had already assumed I was going to, one way or another, and already had her stuff packed. She said she would go with me, so we simply packed the last of our belongings and left the house. Then my husband and I got divorced. However, I got a call from Mr. Jacob later on.
"Hey, you said you wouldn't tell the company, so I came clean about what was going on. But you told the company anyway, didn't you? Frickin' bitch."
He was yelling at the top of his lungs from the get-go. Apparently he was fired from his job alongside his lover. I had sent the photograph of the two of them tied up to his company. He'd cheated on me, and now he was mad at me for cheating. In a different way. He's so goddamn self-centered. They lost their credibility when their infidelity was exposed, and now they'd been fired because they were denied any opportunity to regain their lost credibility. Adultery is on the rise these days, and the cost of cheating in a marriage is very high. It may have been a lighthearted affair, but it ended very badly all the same.
"You'll frickin' pay for this, bitch. I'm gonna charge you alimony."
What for?
"You leaked personal information."
Well, if you're going to charge that kind of fee, why don't you hire a lawyer and ask for it? I already hired a lawyer, a very good one, and together, we're going to demand alimony and child support, thank you very much.
"A lawyer? You hired a lawyer?"
Yes, that's right. I had to hire a lawyer because of the seriousness of the situation, as it directly affects my daughter, too. I'm ready to demand alimony and child support, so if you want to fight me on this, come at me with all you got. Mr. Jacob didn't say anything, but then, suddenly, He started laughing.
So that's what this is about. Just because you didn't get your inheritance, you're trying to siphon money from me to live off of, huh? Is that what this is about?
What are you talking about?
Give me a freaking break. I see right through you. Why should I have to pay you alimony to rebuild your stupid inheritance?
Are you out of your mind, Mr. Jacob? I inherited Dad's estate.
Huh?
Mr. Jacob apparently didn't expect me to say that because even over the phone, I could tell he was frozen stiff. I mean, I'm still his only daughter, so even though Dad said I was disinherited from his estate, it seems he left it to me after all. He actually heard about Brittany from my mother, and he said it was more for his granddaughter's sake than mine.
What the actual hell?
Mr. Jacob became silent. So I'm not asking for alimony because we don't have money. I want you to pay me alimony to try to right the inexcusable wrong you committed. Then Mr. Jacob pretty much screamed right into the phone. It was so loud I had to move my phone away from my ear.
So you're saying I would have gotten a lot of money if I'd stayed with you?
Well, yeah.
You got to be kidding me. I was all about that dim inheritance of yours. I figured with those parents, they'd leave you with something after they passed on, no matter what happened as their only daughter. That's what I thought. But when you came home from the funeral, you didn't say anything, and I went and said I was divorcing you because I really thought they'd cut me off and I'd never get my inheritance.
After everything we'd been through together, Mr. Jacob was only after my money. Now I wish I'd listened to Dad. But it's all in hindsight. After that, Mr. Jacob contacted me again and again, perhaps hoping to start again, but I ignored them all. I was sure he thought about how he could get my inheritance too, with that negative IQ brain of his. I demanded alimony from him and from the woman whom he cheated on me with. The day he was fired, it seemed that Mr. Jacob got into a huge fight at work with his lover. They caused such a huge commotion that security had to intervene with brute force to break up everything. They ended up ending their relationship right then and there, and Mr. Jacob finds himself fired from his job and without a wife or girlfriend. And even if he got a new job, he didn't have any credibility because he didn't hold a position for his age at his last job. And he hasn't been able to find a good new job. He's now living with a regular part-time job and trying to stay afloat with all the alimony and child support he has to pay. Mr. Jacob has contacted me several times since the whole thing was settled for good. When I didn't answer his calls, he would send me a bunch of messages telling me he was so wrong for what he did, that he was so sorry he hurt me, and that he wanted to see his daughter again, etc., etc., etc. But I ignored every single one of his attempts to contact me. Brittany and I decided to move in with Mom. I couldn't leave her alone after Dad died. She and Brittany had never met each other in person, but I guess that's what family is, because they hit it off right away. So much so that nowadays she depends on her grandmother more than she does on me. I was happy to see my mother and daughter getting along so well, even though I kind of missed being the only one supporting Brittany through her rough patches. I vow to cherish the legacy Dad left me and live happily with my family. That's what Dad would have wanted, and I hope to make him proud one day.